Hey there guys, so right here in front of me I should have what is the cheapest brand new mini PC that you can buy on AliExpress. This ended up costing me exactly $70 after tax. So its normal price was something like $68 when I picked this thing up. Now this is the, I'm not 100% sure how you're supposed to pronounce it, but MLLSE M2 Air 1 mini PC. Now this didn't just catch my eye because of its price point, it was also the fact that it is one of the best-selling mini PCs on AliExpress. So that had me really curious to see how this is going to be performing in 2025. See, because the specs of this system, and oh my god, this thing is really tiny. Yeah, look at that. Wow. Okay, yeah. This thing is really tiny, and of course it's because the specs on this thing are not all that impressive at all. It's an Intel Celeron N4000 CPU with only 6 gigabytes of RAM and a 128 gigabyte SSD. Now, just so you know what kind of hardware we're dealing with here, it does have a VGA port. Of course, it does also have HDMI. It has an Ethernet port, headphone jack, USB 3.0, the power connection there, 2 more USB 3.0s, and even a micro SD card slot. Not too bad considering it's also a very tiny system. I think this might not even have a fan in it. I think it might be passively cooled, but we'll have to see. Now, immediately from the specs of this thing, I'm not expecting it to be a great performer at all. I'm just mostly curious to see how Windows is going to behave on here. Now, it did also come with a power adapter that you can swap out between either a UK plug, which seems to be a little bent here, or just the North American plug, which is the one I'm going to be using. There you go. And this is a 25 watt power adapter. Not too surprising considering how low power this system is supposed to be. We of course also get the VESA mount, and that's it. Not even an included HDMI. I guess at the price point that this is at, not too surprising they couldn't even budget in a cable. But that's perfectly fine by me. Less stuff to throw into a drawer. So let's get this thing plugged in and see how it performs. So getting this entire system set up took quite a while. Running through the Windows update took ages because of the fact that we are dealing with only dual cores without any hyper-threading on a 14 nanometer chip. No matter how you look at it, we're in a pretty dire situation here. The fact that Windows 11 in general launched and was running in general was kind of already a victory in my book, but while trying to use the computer at all, it was very much a hollow victory. And in an attempt to try to squeeze out as much performance as I could out of this dual core setup, I did use the Chris Titus Windows utility to try to optimize it as much as possible. I tend to use this utility on pretty much every Windows install out there, but I find that it is pretty useful on lower end systems. But I recognize that I'm actually asking it to perform some miracles here with this little dual core Celeron. I immediately knew I was in trouble though when just the process of running these tweaks ended up taking about 45 minutes. Something that on the worst computers I've ever used, it has still only taken at most a few minutes. So at this point, my expectations for this chip to be able to perform anything were in the absolute gutter. And after waiting all day for all of these updates and for the system to essentially get to the point where it was usable, I was really disappointed to see that it could not do pretty much anything. I tried to watch YouTube and there was really no settings that I could configure it to that wouldn't cause it to immediately choke itself. Windows 11 just has this CPU stressed out 24/7. And well, after going to bed frustrated with just how awful it was of an experience, I decided to just boot into a distro of Linux that I'm familiar with. I went through the entire process of getting MX Linux up and running, which is one of my favorite distros. In fact, it's one of the ones that I use every single day. My main Linux desktop is a mini PC that I have that runs MX Linux, and I just love how lightweight and just out of the way the operating operating system is. And well, this was pretty much the only thing I could think of that could potentially get this little mini PC to be anywhere near half decent. And well, after about a half hour of system updates running, I was finally able to get it to a state where it was ready to be used as a computer. This time around, while trying to watch YouTube, things were a lot more bearable. There were a handful of dropped frames, but it was really only at the very beginning, or if you ever ended up pausing or doing any kind of adjustment to the window. This really is more of a scenario where you play the video and do absolutely nothing else on the computer. But considering how bad it was on Windows, this is, if anything, just remarkable to me. But after spending an almost full 24 hours just trying to get this system to any kind of a functional state, I wanted to do more than just get YouTube to play on here. I did want to play some kind of game on this system, and really the only way that I could imagine I would get that to happen is using Moonlight. So I do have Apollo installed on my gaming PC. That should let us stream any kind of game over to this system here over the network. Now, I'm getting a little ambitious here, but I am going to set the bitrate to the maximum 150. This has a gigabit connection. I don't think that I'm going to need anything more intense than that. And the display that I'm hooked up to right now can go up to 100 Hertz over HDMI. So that's pretty much what I'm targeting here at 1440p. And well, doing this was a success. Sort of. If we take a look at what the performance is actually like here, though, it's not really great. While the game is more than comfortably running at an above 150 FPS, and the stream itself is being broadcasted onto the device at 100 frames per second, the system itself is really only able to render anywhere between 45 to 50 frames at most per second. That means that we're not playing the game at 100 frames per second. And you can really feel it. Playing Marvel Rivals on here felt absolutely abysmal. It really felt like there was just a major delay to everything that I was doing. And it wasn't a latency issue. It definitely was a performance issue, because this feels exactly like what it would feel like to play the game at about 40 frames per second, which is disappointing. It just means that the hardware here cannot render this any better, because we're not having any kind of network issues at all. If we just had a better chip, this would be a great experience. And that's disappointing to see, especially because we're not even getting 60, let alone the 100 that we're supposed to be reaching right now.
I mean, I guess I should be happy that it's running at all. maybe having the expectation of it being at a 60 FPS frame rate at least was a little high. But I mean, considering where we started, the fact that I am playing Spider-Man 2 on this thing is, if anything, kind of impressive. Of course, we are just streaming this over the network from my gaming PC to this thing, so I was hoping for much better performance in terms of the video playback here, but I mean, it's doable.
So that is the cheapest mini PC that I could find on AliExpress. Look, at $67, my expectations are going to be rock bottom, but I do think that any mark of a even half decent product is that it should accomplish its most basic promise. You know, you sell me a phone for $50, I at least expect it to let me be able to make a call. You sell me a computer for $67, I at least want to be able to use the internet. And the fact that as configured with 6 gigabytes of RAM and a 128 gigabyte, I guess SD card or something for storage, at least based off of what Task Manager says, it's an SD card. But with all of that, we're not able to do anything in Windows. You know, Windows 11 is just way too heavy, especially because really the biggest limiting factor of this thing is the fact that we are dealing with a dual core Celeron. No hyper-threading, nothing like that. Just 2 Celeron cores from damn near 8 years ago. So it's an immediate fail in my book, because I have to install Linux just to be able to get YouTube to not be an absolute disaster. And while yes, we were able to play some games on this thing eventually, the fact that it couldn't even play back an Apollo live stream at 1080p 60 $120. That's just a level of disappointment that I'm genuinely shocked. It's one of those scenarios where if you're looking to spend as little as possible on a computer, look in the used market. Buy a 6th, 7th, or 8th generation i5 or i7 mini PC. Or if you want something brand new, spend an extra $30 and get yourself something that has the N100 or the N95 or anything like that. I'm not even the biggest fan of those chips, but at least those are going to give you a mediocre Windows experience as opposed to an unusable Windows experience. The fact that it took using an extremely light version of a Linux operating system just to get barely passable YouTube and a barely usable game streaming experience, it's just, I can't recommend this thing. I can't recommend it at all. Even at the price point that it's at. Look in the used market. I'm so shocked that this is one of the best selling computers on AliExpress. You know, you spend an extra $100, right? And you can get this right here. The Gen Machine Ren 5000 has about a bajillion different versions that have all kinds of different chips at wildly different prices, and any of those will do a better job than this thing for not that much money. Like, we're not talking about, oh, this is 10% better or anything like that. I'm talking about multiple times more performance. In many cases, a 10 to 20x increase in performance. For $100, in what other world do you get that level of performance increase? At $240, you get this right here, which is even more powerful than even this system right here. So you end up in a scenario where an extra $200 over this, you end up with something so powerful. There is just no world where you should buy this when it can't even be a good thin client. It's a disaster. It's just a disaster. Don't buy this. Buy anything else. I'm going to link down below a bunch of things that you should buy instead of this. But I'll catch you guys in the next one.